Okay, these problems that I've chosen to go over, like I said, they're the most often missed problems. And so this is a problem in the pink packet. And this is a very typical Algebra 1 system problem. And so when you have a problem like this, possibly you can figure it out by guess and check, but of course my mind works in terms of algebra. So there's two equations we're going to write. We're going to write the equation for how much money and how many. We're going to write two equations. You can solve a system that has two equations and two variables.
If any of you have missed.
How much did the small box, no, let's start with the large box. How much did the large box of candy cost? And so you can use some other variable, but I tend to like X and Y. How much, because it's 3X, because however many boxes you sold, if you sold 10 boxes, you would multiply it by 3 to get your total amount of money, right? That's 3 times X. How much did the small box cost? What was the total amount of money? That's your money equation. Money, money, money. Next, you're going to have how many. How many total boxes were sold? And that was large boxes plus small boxes. That's the only kind I got. So they add up to be 37. Now that I have two equations, that's a system because there's more than one. You solve a system by either elimination or substitution. Most of us preferred elimination. What do you want to eliminate, the X or the Y? It's your choice, which one? If you're going to eliminate X, this number right here needs to be a -3, so when I add them together, it will eliminate. So I need to multiply this equation by -3. When I multiply this equation by -3, I would get -3y equals -3 times 7 is 21. And then I need to bring this equation down so that I can add up the columns. When I add up the columns, what happens to my x's? Cancel out. This would be a -y equals -15. Divide by -1. And how many, and what's y equal to? 15. And so, come on, slowpoke. Y equals -15, and that was small boxes. Now, I had an equation like this, x plus y equals 37. The total number of boxes was 37. So then I plug in the 15, and I solve for x, and so how much is x equal to? So what's the answer? Well, there were 22 small boxes, and there were 15 large boxes, and what is it the question asked me to figure out? How many more? That difference. So then you would just subtract the 15 from the 22 for your final answer. So it appears that we had forgotten how to solve systems. The next one that I wanted to look at is problem number 3 on the pink packet. I was very disappointed with the number of people that missed this one because it hasn't been that long ago since we have done this problem. And so if this is not defined, we call those excluded values. It is not defined because the denominator cannot be equal to 0. Have we heard that before? The denominator cannot be equal to 0. So could you go right ahead and solve that equation? K cannot be equal to 1/3. At 1/3, it is not defined. At 1/3, if we were graphing it, it would make an asymptote. So, we remember that part now? That's all you had to do. This one, problem number 4 on the pink packet, was also very easy, but a few people forgot. When you have an inequality, what is the rule about negative signs and inequalities? When you multiply or divide by a negative, the inequality switches. It changes from a greater than to a less than. I had a few people forget that. When you multiply or divide by a negative on an inequality problem, it switches the inequality. The next one I need to look at is all the way over to problem number 12. We had some difficulties with almost anything that had a percent in it. So, we are going to, according to the chart, what is the percent increase of factory 2 chairs from 2009 to 2010? So first of all, we need to find factory 2. And second of all, we need to make sure we're in the column that has chairs. So, how do you find the percent increase? The percent increase is the difference divided by the original, and then you times it by 100 to change it into a percent. This would be 120 over 240. This is a formula you need to memorize, or you need to learn some common sense. The difference divided by the original times 100 to change it into a percent. There are several formulas that you need to memorize. You may need to take your ISN book home tonight to memorize your formulas. You will need to know the formulas for mean, median, mode, and range. Probability. You will need to know the area formulas for a square, rectangle, and triangle. And you'll need to know the percent increase formula. Many of you on problem number 15 went like that. The most often wrong answer was B squared. The reason that's a wrong answer, I was really sad that you forgot about adding glue. That has adding glue right there. Do you remember talking about adding glue? You can't just cancel when there's adding glue. And you may have heard this before. Factor first. What can factor out of the numerator? The numerator you can factor out a B. Now this B right here, does it have any adding glue? Then you can cancel this, and the answer was 1 plus B. And then next, skip over to the yellow packet. Did I do problem number 2 in this class? Okay, so most of you got this much done. You saw the formula and you wrote the formula down. That was a good thing. Now, Here's what most of you missed. This last sentence. According to this model, the weekly revenue is. Interpret is to mean is equal to. Is means it is equal to $1,200, This is squared. What kind of equation does that make this? This is a quadratic equation. Have you heard before, if it's a quadratic equation, make it equal to 0 and factor it? Now, the numbers are kind of big, though. And so we can take care of that. We can divide everything by negative 200 to make the numbers a little bit smaller. And so that cancels out these zeros, and 2 goes into 10 5 times. And 200 goes into 200 one time, and I divided by a negative 200, so it would cancel that negative out right there. And the zeros cancel out, and so 2 goes into 12 6 times. So if I'm going to solve a quadratic, I have to make it equal to 0 and factor it. So I need to add 6 to both sides, and then I'm going to put it in standard form with the p first. Add 6 to both sides. Only don't change the sign in the middle of the problem, then you'll have a sign mistake. Now, the first time I factored this, I factored it like this. But does negative 6 times a positive 1 make a positive 6 over there? And so, for some reason, this is one that's difficult to factor. And so, so that I don't have a sign mistake, negative 2 times negative 3 makes the positive 6 and then adds up to the negative 5. So we have 2 answers, but both of the answers are not in your answer choices. You only pick the one that is, obviously. But a lot of people did not put this in their equation. If you don't have this, you don't have an equation, and can you solve it if it doesn't have an equal sign? So some people were having difficulty solving it because they didn't put down what it was equal to. Okay, 9. So there were 2 problems with problem number 9. Is first, what it even tells you, the arithmetic mean is the average of A, B, C, and D. How do you find an average? Would add them all up and divide by 4, since there's 4 of them. But we don't know exactly what A and B are equal to. But from geometry, do you remember the degrees for a straight line? These 2 angles have to add up to be 180. And these 2 angles have to add up to be 180. So what's 180 plus another 180? And what's 360 divided by 4? You need to remember that a straight line adds up to 180, and that the sum of the angles of a triangle add up to equal 180. Those are 2 basic facts from geometry that you need to memorize. Another basic fact from geometry that you need to know is A squared plus B squared equals C squared. What kind of triangle does that go with? Okay. Solutions to equations. No, sorry. This isn't equations. This is systems of equations. What makes them systems? There's more than one. And so we have this system. So you're going to have to take your answer choices and solve them, and you're trying to find which one doesn't have a solution. So I'm going to solve by elimination. What do you want to eliminate, x or y? If you want to eliminate y, I need to have a positive 2 right here. So I need to multiply this by a negative, multiply all the terms by a negative, change the signs on all of them, it's multiplying by -1, and add up the columns. What happens to my x's? What happens to the y's? Cancel. And so this all cancels out and makes a big fat 0. Can you solve that? No. That's why A is the answer choice. Can't solve it. Is that all? Okay. So are there any other problems on either the yellow or the pink packet? In case you, did I say this at the beginning of class? These are the problems from quiz 1, quiz 2, and quiz 3. That's where I got them, was out of these packets. So these are not new packets for you to complete. These are problems you've mostly done these problems. So are there any other problems you want me to work? Problem number 11 on the yellow packet asks about percents. Now, to make this easier to figure out, I'm going to use an actual number to start with. Because do we know what the coat or shirt, whichever one it was, starts out with? No. But it's giving us percents. What does the word percent mean? No, it does not. What is the actual meaning of the word percent? Part out of 100. It's not just any decimal, it's the decimal part out of 100. And so to make this easier to figure out, I'm going to suppose that the coat starts out at $100. And then the first thing is 20% off. That means I would multiply times 0.20. By the way, I do not expect you to have a calculator on this type of problem. So without using your calculator, this would be $20. What? Does that mean I'm going to pay the $20 for the coat? No, we would take $20 off. And if that was the only discount, that would be the price of the coat. But this person has another discount. They have 5% off. Off of what? The 100 or the 80? The 80, it specifically says it comes off of this price. So 80 times 0.05. What's 8 times 5? 40. And because of the decimals, that would just be $4 off. Wouldn't be $40 off. That would be half, 50%, not 5%. And so this is going to be $4 off. So if the coat started out at $100, with both of the discounts, I would be paying $76. $76 out of $100. Can you find the answer choice that goes with 76 out of 100?